Hello, everyone, and welcome to lesson 3 from the book Prosperity by Charles Fillmore. And I'm going to let my other co-ministers here introduce themselves. Christina?
All right, well, I'll go. Hi, I'm Reverend Christina Garza. I am the senior minister at Unity of Nashville, and I am so jazzed up about getting into the nitty-gritty of prosperity.
And I am Reverend Todd Humphrey. I am the spiritual leader at Crystal Coast Unity in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. As we dive in tonight, we want to remind all of you, as you have questions that come up, put them in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know if something that we read or that we talk about, because we're going to interrupt ourselves and we're going to talk about these ideas. If something comes up and you're like, I don't get that, or I don't agree, speak up. Let us know. We want to dive into this conversation with you. So we can't do that if you don't comment. And if you are getting something out of this, make sure you like and share this video when we get done with tonight's episode.
That's it. And I realized I started talking but never introduced myself. So I'm Reverend Wally White at Unity in Greensboro. And this really is all about the conversation. Like, this isn't about you sitting listening to us talk. We're going to have a conversation that you can hear, but we want to have a conversation with you that we will type and do all of that. As Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman said, it works if you work it, and that's going to be required in the conversation. So please join. This information excites me often, like reading it and rereading it. So I'm excited to be able to do it with these other ministers, and I'm excited to do it in having conversation with you all as well. So let's get started. Christina, it's so wonderful to have you back also. Let me say that. And so would you like to bless us with starting us off on reading? And
Absolutely. Well, I want to remind people, Charles Fillmore is known like as being difficult to read. You always hear that he's like, that's terse, that it's kind of old language. So I invite people to just get over that, because part of it is just listening with an open heart, and listening with the readiness to sort of just download whatever it is that you need to get from this material. And so just be open to it. That's all I ask as we read. And, if you find yourself being a little like, what? I didn't understand that word or that phrasing or what have you, just kind of roll with it and just try to work with it and allow Spirit to work within you, with you, co-creating with you as you kind of really dig into these teachings tonight or today or this morning or wherever you're listening to this. So we are on lesson 3, and the chapter is Faith in the Invisible Substance, the Key to Demonstration. In this lesson, we are considering the subject of faith, especially as it applies to the demonstration of prosperity. In this study, as in all others, we must start in the one mind. God had faith when he imagined man and the universe, and though his faith brought all things into being, man, being like God, must also base his creations on faith as the only foundation. Here then is our starting point in building a prosperity consciousness and making our world as we would have it. We all have faith, for it is innate in every man or woman or child. Our question is how we may put it to work in our affairs. Jesus gave us our best understanding of faith when he described Peter as a rock and asserted that his church, the ecclesia or called out ones, was to build up with this rock or faith as a sure foundation. In this sense, faith represents substance, the underlying basic principle of all manifestation. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, a conviction of things not seen. It is quite possible to possess a reality that cannot be seen, touched, or comprehended by any of the outer senses. It is faith when we are fully conscious of things not seen and have the assurance of things not yet manifest. In other words, faith is that consciousness in us of the reality of the invisible substance and of the attributes of mind by which we lay hold of it. We must realize that the mind makes real things. Just a thought or just a mere idea, we sometimes lightly say, like thinking that these thoughts and ideas are the eternal realities from which we build our life and our world. Faith is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. And I'm going to say that again because this is a typical Charles Fillmore phrase that is often used. Faith is a perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. You hear of a certain proposition that appeals to you and you say, I have faith in that proposition. Some man whose character seems right is described to you and you say, I have faith in that man. What do you mean by having faith? You mean that certain characteristics of men or things appeal to you and these immediately begin a constructive work in your mind. What is that work? It is the work of making the proposition or man real to your consciousness. The character and attributes of these things in your mind become substantial to you because of your faith. The office of faith is to take abstract ideas and give them definite form and substance. Ideas are abstract and formless to us until they become substance, the substance of faith. A very important work in soul culture is the establishment of a faith substance. Once we discern this law of soul building by faith, I gotta say, I love that. I'm all about the soul culture and soul faith. We're gonna dive back into that one in a second, y'all. But once we discern this law of soul building by faith, we find the Hebrew scriptures full of illustrations of it. The first chapter of Luke's gospel tells us how Elizabeth and Zacharias were told by an angel that they would have a son and that his name would be John. Zacharias was burning incense at the altar in the exercises of his duties as a priest. This means that when the mind is looking towards spirit, even if it be in a blind way and is seeking spiritual things, it will become spiritualized. And I'm going to stop there because I think we've got some really good stuff so far. Any thoughts that you all have on anything we've read?
Yeah, I've been ready to stop since you read the definition we've heard, but I'm like, let me just wait, Wally. Wait. But right from the beginning of the famous Bible verse of faith is the substance of things not seen. Paraphrase. But because we all hear that, and at some point when you hear the same thing over and over, it starts to not hold, I think, the same kind of meaning. And so it's important to stop and be like, well, what does that mean to me? And to me, it means faith is believing, and not even believing, but expecting, even though, fill in the blank, like expecting that the good is going to work out in my favor, even though I've got a list of examples of why I should not expect that. But I'm holding on to the faith of knowing the Spirit of God that I exercise within, that I am part of. And so I am holding the expectation that everything is working out in my faith.
What do you think, Todd? What's kind of got you?
Well, one thing that occurs to me about faith is that we can, when we get too attached into this material world and we say, oh, well, I don't have faith. And we've all known someone that said, oh, my faith is weak. But the truth is in that moment, what's really happening is we're placing our faith in lack and limitation. Because we either believe in this unformed substance and that we have the power to bring forth whatever we want, or we're putting our faith in that's not true. And so we have to when we're using this faculty of faith, we have to make sure that we're also, partnering, with our strength, but also with our elimination faculty to get
Yeah.
rid of these error thoughts and to let go of any limitation. Because by nature of being created in the image and likeness of the Creator, we are unlimited in potential.
Mhm.
But we have to put our faith that that universal mind will deliver.
Mhm.
Um, and that I think is part of that soul unfoldment, becoming the Christ of our being.
Mhm. I love what he says here, kind of what when he's talking about the Luke gospel and the idea of things becoming spiritualized. And so in that moment, right, part of the faith is sometimes something like you said, people think, well, I don't have it, or it's weak, or it's not. But sometimes you're doing things that are creating your faith that are deepening your faith, and sometimes you don't even realize it, right? So here in this, it's talking about we're burning incense. He's kind of doing his duties. He's kind of in the process where he's already open, right? And then that's how all of the miracles and wonders then come into play. And I love that idea of that we're opening ourselves when we take sometimes small steps. It doesn't have to be this big grandeur, like a gargantuan steps or steps of grandeur. Like we're so in our culture, I feel like we're so attuned to thinking you gotta like do the big, go big, right? And sometimes it's the small things that we do where we step out into talking to someone, or engaging in a new way, or doing a new practice, and all of a sudden this flood of prosperity comes in where you have a new relationship or a new friendship or something that kind of tells you like, what did I did something, didn't I? And you don't even realize it sometimes.
But
So I love
but
that.
this story that Fillmore is directing us to is perfect in the fact that it illustrates how divine mind communicates to us. And just like Zacharias, who is in this open space and willing, and yet there is still doubt, right? Because Zacharias goes, he says to the angel, he's like, is this really, is this real? Or are you kidding me? Like, my wife is really old. And he becomes mute and he cannot speak
Mhm.
until all of this plays forth as Spirit has says it will, as the angel announced. Doubt can show up, and we, shut your mouth and see
Right.
it play out.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
because that's the thing. It's like Christina, I think you nailed it when you said like sometimes it's about the small stuff. I think always it's about the small stuff, except sometimes what seems small to us may seem gigantic to someone else. But if it seems gigantic to me and I'm the one that's got to do the call, I'm already in trouble, because if it seems gigantic, I'm attaching the word impossible or unlikely to it. And as long as I believe that, it's true for me. So if I start with something that I can accept and move forward, it can grow from there. And then the metaphysical lesson, as Todd was just saying, is often the best way, not even that, the most important way to get there is to shut your mouth and like let your mind go to work, because our mouth will, sometimes we just think we're supposed to talk, and when most of the time, as one of the great philosophers that I follow often and now currently watch on Amazon Prime, Judge Judy says, um, God gave us,
Probably preach.
right? God gave us one mouth and two ears. There's a hint to that. You should be using these double the amount of using this. So anyway.
I love it. I love it. Too fun. Well, shall I go on? I'm sure we
Yeah.
get into some other fun stuff here. All right. So let's see. Where was I? See all this conversation I lost. Spiritualize. The burning of incense typifies spiritualization, and Zacharias represents the perceptive and Elizabeth the receptive qualities of the soul. When these two work in conjunction in prayer, meditation, and aspiration, the soul is open to the higher thoughts or angels that bring the promise of a new and definite state of consciousness. Zacharias doubted the promise of a son because his wife was past the age of childbearing, and because of his doubts, he was stricken dumb. This means that when we perceive spiritual truth and doubt it, we retard its outer expression. It cannot be spoken into manifestation through us because of our doubt. And all the growth is then thrown up upon the soul. Elizabeth hid herself 5 months, but when the soul begins to feel the presence of the new ego or new state of consciousness, then we again come into faith expression. The speech of Zacharias is restored. It was the same way in the bringing forth of Jesus. A promise was made to Mary, and Joseph was assured that the child was the offspring of the Holy Spirit. This represents a still higher step in the work of faith. The bringing forth of John the Baptist is the intellectual perception of truth. The intellect grasps the truth first. The next step is the bringing forth of substance and life in the subconsciousness. When we give ourselves entirely to the Spirit, ooh, I just got a little goosebump. When we give ourselves entirely to the Spirit, we may do things without knowing exactly why. That is because faith is at work in us, and even if we do not know the law and cannot explain faith to the outer consciousness, it continues to do its perfect work and eventually brings forth the demonstration. Do not fear the power that works out things in the invisible. When you get a strong perception of something that your inner mind tells you is true and good, act on it, and your demonstration will come. That is the way of a living that is the way a living faith works. And it is the law of the creative word. Okay, I know I'm going to try not to stop as much, y'all, but this again here is so good, right? When we don't realize some, or we're called to something that may not seem logical, it is totally irrational, and yet it's divine mind sort of sourcing us. What do y'all think about all this stuff? Because this is really good for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to talk ourselves out of stuff. I think that the world is often encouraging us to talk ourselves out of, well, you can't do that. Well, you're not qualified to do that. Well, the inner spirit spoke to you. Who are you to think God talked to you? Well, I'll tell you exactly who I know I am, Um, but uh um but yeah, that is part of the work all the time, is to accept that there's this greater vision, there's this greater thing. And if we want to grow, then that means stepping out of what we're already doing and being willing to go into the uncomfortable of being outside of what we already know.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, but really important.
Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors gave me a phrase, and I wish I could remember who so I could give them credit. But at some point, someone said to me, the difference between a mystic and a madman is who you tell.
Mm.
And I think that sometimes we have these this knowingness and this pull to do certain things or to make certain decisions. And if we try to explain that we just know that we know that we know, somebody's going to talk us out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think sometimes it's better to just follow the internal call. Like we have there. I mean, I see it blooming now in society. People paying more attention to their intuition. This place where the spirit is calling out and giving us information. But I think for so many years we tried to suppress that in people and call them crazy.
Yeah.
And in the world today, I will happily wear a name tag that has crazy and heretic on it. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got my witch's broom, so I totally Support that. Anyway, we won't get into that one. That's a whole rabbit hole we'll get into. But I do think it's interesting when we think about the ways that spirit is always speaking to us through us, right? Even like, have y'all ever had a question and all of a sudden you look at a bumper sticker and there's the answer, Nike, just do it, or you'll see somebody's license plate, or somebody will be having a conversation in the back of you in the checkout at Walmart, and you'll all of a sudden hear what you need to hear, or something will be said that sort of brings something up or out in whatever you're going through, or you need to know or need to hear. And so I just invite everyone to start listening to that. You're right, in that way, Todd, that we've suppressed that. We've been taught as a society to suppress that. And so it's so important to start cultivating that and testing it, like on the little things, like, okay, let me do this. And like, ooh, I was right on that one.
And pay attention, both with our listening and our vision, like that, talk less and look more and listen more, as Wally was talking about. This past Sunday, I spend way too much time on TikTok, y'all. I have to admit that. And I was just scrolling through the TikTok, and I came across the great spiritual philosopher Phyllis Diller, right? And got this incredible message from her that I was able to use in my talk on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Just about how she focuses on love. She signed every letter that she ever wrote. She signed it Love Phyllis. Even business letters, everything was Love Phyllis. And she said, and then I would walk through airports and people would scream out, I love you. And she's like, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't give all the love away. Right?
It's beautiful.
And so what we need is always provided to us, but we've got to look and listen.
Yeah.
It's always there. That's part of our prosperity. Divine ideas can show up in any way, shape, or form, because if there is only one power and one presence, God, then it's showing up in everything. We have to see it.
And that's the thing, like that spirituality is an infinite constant flow that was flowing before we showed up in this human experience and would be flowing long after we're forgotten. But at the same time, we have to be called upon to turn it on in moments that we really need it. And that doesn't mean that it's turned on and off. It's always on, but our attention is so regularly not on it that, like, when the things come up that are like, oh, this is a crappy day because, or, oh, this is a horrible experience because, it's like, oh, let me tap in and just take a moment to say, God, just God, let me know what I need to know in this moment. I trust that I'm taken care of. Okay, now let me get back, and now maybe I don't have to cuss this person out after all. And or maybe I still do, but they'll take it nicer. But
I'll cut them out with grace.
Grace, look, I say all the time, I try, and every time I have my bad moments during the week, I try and work them into Sunday service, because I think it's important to say, look, just because I did maybe I've done a little more study than some of y'all, and I got this title called Reverend, still a human being having human experiences all the time. And but hopefully I've got a few more tools to get me out of trouble a little quicker than I used to,
Mm-hmm. I heard that one. True confessions here, people. True confessions. Well, I'm going to read a little bit more, and then whenever someone else is ready, or I'm not sure how much to read, but we'll go for it. So faith can also have understanding added to it. We call our spiritual faculties out of our subconsciousness. When Jesus did some of his most remarkable works, he had with him Peter, James, and John. Peter represents faith, James, wisdom or judgment, and John, love. These three faculties, when expressed together in mind, accomplish apparent miracles. You've called out faith in things spiritual, you have faith in God, and you have cultivated your unity with the one mind. If you then use spiritual judgment and do your work in love, you have become a teacher in Israel. In order to have understanding of the law through which we gain or lose in the use of the invisible substance, we must use discrimination or judgment. There is a guiding intelligence always present that we can lay hold of and make our own. It is ours. It belongs to us, and it is our birthright, both to know it and to use it. Some metaphysicians mistakenly think they must have hard experience, in order to appreciate the better things of life. They think poverty is a blessing because it educates people to the appreciation of plenty when they get it. They say that it is God's will for us to have some hard times and some good times, feasts and famines. This is not logically true when you consider God as principle. If you think of God as a man who arbitrarily gives or withholds by the exercise of his personal will, you might reach such a conclusion. But God is changeless, and if he gives one moment, he will continue to give it eternally. It is his nature to give, and his nature is eternally the same. When you talk of hard times, famines, lack, you are talking of something that has no place in the mind of God. You are acknowledging God in all your ways, but are acknowledging error and affirming that the world has its source in outer things. You must turn around and get into this consciousness that in mind, in spirit, there is abundance. We often wonder how Jesus could multiply the 5 loaves and 2 fishes to meet the hunger of 5,000 persons. It was done through a thorough understanding of this law. The 5 loaves represent the 5 sense applications of divine substance. The 2 fishes represent the yeast or multiplying power put into the substance, the source of the increase. We are told that if the yeast of a single setting of bread were allowed to increase, it would fill a space larger than this planet. This shows that there is no limit to the increasing power of an elemental substance. It is for us to use as Jesus used this power. It was not a miracle, but something that we all have within us as an awakened ability, and we can learn to develop and use as Jesus did. Jesus entered into the silence, prayed, and blessed the substance at hand. If we would multiply and increase the power, substance, and life in us, and at our command, we must get very still and realize our resource is spirit, that is God, and that it is here in all its fullness. We must make contact with it in faith. Then we shall find it welling up within us. Some of you have no doubt had experience, but you just let it ooze away without understanding it, you get no benefit. Here is the key to this life and substance you feel when you sit in the silence. You must begin to speak these words with power and authority. When there is no worldwide belief in financial depression, lack of circulation, stagnation, things do not go as we expect and we develop fear. A belief in lack of circulation of money. But if we know the law, we do not come under this fear thought. At any time, many persons may make money. They use this law and take advantage of opportunity. We should bless everything that we have, for we can increase and multiply what we have by speaking words. Jesus said that his words were spirit and life. Did you ever think that your word is charged with great spiritual life force? I'm going to stop there again. Thoughts?
I want to go back and invite everybody to underline, we should bless everything that we have, for we can increase and multiply what we have by speaking words.
Mm-hmm.
What we have. If we look at any of the miracles in both the Hebrew scriptures and in the Christian scriptures, they always start with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always look and pay attention to the abundance that's sitting right here in front of us. And if we pay attention to what we have and use the power of our thinking and feeling nature and use affirmative prayer and speak the right words, hold the right consciousness, what we have is increased. That's the law. And I mean, and Jesus did it clearly at the with the loaves and fishes, but it repeats itself. This formula repeats all over scripture. And I know I'm guilty of it. As Wally was saying, we have to give these true life examples to show that we're on this journey too. And there are times that I don't pay attention to the abundance that's right here in front of me, that I already have. And when I do, right, when we take care of what we got, something greater can be given. I'll step down off of my soapbox.
You know what you reminded me, the last time that I was on with you all, I was talking about how when I started ministerial school, I had just lost my job. And it was crazy to think about stepping into wanting to start school and having to pay tuition and books and all of this and the travel that's sometimes involved in ministerial school. And then I decided that I was going to ask people, that was part of my own developing my prosperity consciousness to say, we're sometimes taught that, the pick yourself up by your bootstraps American mentality, like you got to do it on your own. And there was a shame that I had about asking. So that was one thing, in terms of just opening up that channel to be able to ask and to receive. But a funny thing happened, and this goes to the point here about blessing everything. I remember that one day I got a check from my insurance company. And I opened up the check and it was like $7.13. And the first inclination was, I looked at it and I was like, not this wasn't even worth the stamp. Like, why did y'all even send me $7? Like, for me to have to figure out how to deposit this and everything. As much as, I was thinking in my mind, right? As much as I pay for my house insurance and my car insurance, like, this is an affront, this is whatever. And then I stopped myself immediately and was like, hold him up. Like, this is $7 you just got out of nowhere. Hold up. So I took my check and I was like blessing it. I was praying over it. Ended up putting that sucker on my altar for a little bit until I finally deposited. And that was sort of like, I caught myself. Like, if I'm really opening up to the channel of abundance, you open it up with the least of things sometimes. Every little thing becomes an important building block as you develop and you open yourself up to that prosperity consciousness. And the same way I've heard like mentors of mine have said, when you pay your bills, bless those bills. Like we all don't want to pay bills, right? But at the same time, it's like allowing for that healthy release of funds allows for that healthy return of funds, so it's always interesting.
Yeah, I forget the story exactly how it went, but there was a story about a rich man picking up pennies and somebody saying, why are you taking time to pick that up when you have so much money? And him pointing out that every of those coins has "In God We Trust" on it. And I started right then, man, if I walk past a penny, you better believe I'm going to stop and pick it up. I don't care if it's on heads, tails, it's God and it's money, and I'm going to stop and get it. And say, "In God I trust," and that's my little prayer, and I take it, And I mean, what I love, the reason why I'm in unity versus some of the other great new thought teachings is the metaphysics of it. And when you look at that 5 loaves and 2 fish and the 5,000 people, if you first know that those people, if you're named people in the Bible, then you may represent something very specific. But when they just use the general term people, we're talking ideas. We're talking about a man who had 5,000 ideas wanting substance and started pinching it off. And if you just start pinching off, that one little bit of satisfying will satisfy the area. And we have those times in our lives where we're like, I got to figure out how I'm going to pay these bills, or I got to figure out Christmas is on the way, who's going to make the list this year? It's like, just start pinching off and eat one bite at a time, right? Like if you sit down and you're like, all right, this one's got to be my meal. You can't in one bite eat those 5 loaves and those 2 fish. Just pinch off and have your one bite. And that bite will likely provide part of the substance of some of the next ideas that were coming before you even need to go back into prayer and pinch off again. It's about trusting and using, and remembering that mustard seed example of it just takes a little bit to like get the ball rolling.
I'm wondering what you guys think before we move on about what he's talking about in terms of, we feel like culturally we have to suffer at some point, like in order to evolve, in order to spiritually whatever, we have to suffer, and that things like in our subconscious, maybe what he's getting at here is that we have this idea of there's always going to be lack. There'll always be poor people. There'll all these kind of things that we've sort of bought into. And I'm wondering what y'all think about that in terms of how he's talking about it, as well as how he's saying the importance of the spoken word, I think, as well as thought around some of these things.
I see Todd about to pop something up.
I'm looking for the right words. A part of what I'm doing is I'm seeing some of the misappropriation, the misunderstanding of a lot of scripture, and go and give everything away and then follow me, right? And blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, and the misunderstanding of a number of scriptural references that would have people believe that being poor is godly, right? And it's just a misunderstanding and a failure in some church leadership directing us on how to interpret these scriptures. Because certainly, growing up in traditional Christianity, it was a blessing to be poor, and because God's going to provide. Well, God also says, pick up your bed and walk. Jesus said that,
right?
But anyway, it's we have to do our part. And if we attach to this idea that, if I'm poor, I'm godly, right? Well, no, that's cleanliness is next to godliness, not poorness.
Right.
And so go bathe and wash away all of those negative thoughts, all of those lack thoughts, all of those limitation thoughts. Be clean of that. It's not about giving up everything and having nothing. It's about not being attached to it.
Right.
But I'm preaching to the preachers. So, we can't be attached to the material appearance of things. And we can have beautiful lives. And, I'm quoting myself from my message this past week. It's not love until you give it away. Our abundance is not our abundance until we put it into circulation, because there is a spiritual law of circulation. There is not a spiritual law of hoarding, right? So if you have everything and you hoard it and you don't put it into circulation, then are you really prosperous? I don't think so.
Right. And, the Bible teaches us on the not hoarding with Moses as well, about like, use what you're using today. Don't let it go away. But also, what I've kept hearing in my head is, I cannot get poor enough to make somebody to make the rest of the world rich. The richest people collectively on this planet cannot get poor enough to make everybody else rich. May give us a few extra good days. If they gave us a bunch of their cash, we'd have fun. But if we think being rich is having and using what already is, then we're missing the opportunity of being in the flow of what's coming, because we're still trying to use what already came. And we're and that's where I think this comes, Christina, in answering your question, is that ego mind is looking at what the physical eyes see, and that's all that it believes in. And so in that kind of belief, things, we're heading into winter right now. My beautiful green grass is starting to be brown. If I just stuck with what's in front of me, I'm like, oh, beauty is over. Now it's all done. But I got to remind myself that there's a cycle of it coming back through. And the same thing with prosperity and finances. Like my accounts goes down and then it comes back up. And when it goes down the next time, I got to remember it's going to come right on back up again, because that's what it does. Because money comes in and then I pay bills and I give thanks that I get to sit in a house that's warm when it's cold outside, and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. You know, it's it's again, that spiritual flow is constant, but our attention can bing all over the place. And so when it's binging off into an earth experience or a human experience, that's cool. There's nothing bad about that. We're here. We're supposed to have fun and enjoy this place. But it's like when suddenly we're feeling the lack, it's because we've turned our attention too far away from our spiritual truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember one time, I love that you said the ego mind, because I think that's so important. One time when I was going through ministerial school and I was going through my interviews through the LNO, as they call license and ordination interviews. I remember a couple of the ministers chattering as I was doing whatever, talking. And they were saying, we didn't get into the ministerial business to be rich. And that struck me like so deeply. Like I thought, so then the implication was we got into the ministerial business to be poor. And I thought, I didn't sign up for that one. They didn't say that in the application process, because this is not what I signed up for. Like, why do we have to ascribe to that? And I think that's part of the ego mind, right? That's telling us that we're having to sacrifice. To be good is to sacrifice, right? And so even sometimes subtly, all these messaging, I think it's so important for us to sort of flag that for ourselves and for the people, that there's subtle messaging sometimes that we do these things. I talked to someone not that long ago, and she was saying about wanting a relationship, a romantic relationship. And she was saying, I have such a good life. I have a great job. I have a great family, naming all these wondrous, prosperous things she had. And she said, I feel that it is wrong for me to want more.
Mm.
And so it's like, again, and this is somebody that is practicing principle, right? So, we have to be diligent about catching ourselves when we're in those moments of not understanding that spirit is allness. Spirit is magnificent. Spirit is about everything. And so there is no too much. There just isn't.
No, Della used to say, she said, I have no interest in making my ends meet. I want them to wrap around and around and around and around me, because I got a lot to spend and a lot to buy, and I'm expensive to keep up. And that's the way it is. Not the way it has to be. That is the way it is. There are things now I don't require quite what she requires, but like I also like there's certain things I stopped yesterday because I do have, some stuff going on. And I was like, that little candle behind me on that shelf, I bought that yesterday. I had a moment that I'm like, should I spend money on that? And then my inner spirit said, hell yes, you should buy that candle, because you like candles and you need some new ones. So I bought some new ones. And, but you got to have that attitude, because you can't possibly give anything of real value to the rest of the world or to just that next person next to you that you love so much if you don't keep yourself full of the very best.
Amen. Amen.
You got to expect it, and you got to want it for you, so that but it's because if you're like, well, but I should be trying to give to others. Yes, you should. And you should want to give them the very best if you want to give them anything. So get it. It's got to come through you out to anybody else.
Yes. Love it. So should I keep going, or should I turn give the baton to someone else?
I can read a little bit.
Go for it.
All right. We're at the top of 48, I believe.
Yes.
I'm going to go back and read the question, actually, that started on 47. Did you ever think that your word is charged with great spiritual life force? It is. Be careful of your words. Man shall be held accountable for his lightest word. If you talk about substance in a negative way, your finances will be decreased. If you talk about it in an appreciative, large way, you will be prospered. See, I'm wanting to stop and talk, but I'm not. I'm going to keep going right now. But you can't. Okay, I'm going to keep going. If we could release the energy in the atoms the scientists tell us about, we could supply the world. This power lies within every one of us. We can begin by freeing the little ideas we have and making them fill the world with thoughts of plenty. We must realize that all power is given to us in heaven and in earth, as Jesus said. He told his apostles that they should receive power when the Holy Spirit had come upon them. They were told to go up into the upper room in the crown of the head, where spiritual forces begin the formation of new ideas. After you get into the spiritual consciousness and receive the quickening, speak the word with authority and power, concentrating the attention at the power center in the throat. We find it effective to speak the words aloud and then sink back to the other side, Galilee, as Jesus often did, to rest and speak them again silently. You can send forth this vibratory energy of spirit and break down the inertia caused by thoughts of fear and lack. Carve out ways, open new avenues to the demonstration of your good. To bring forth these undeveloped spiritual qualities, we must believe in them. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is. Lord, keep us from unbelief, from leaning on the things we see, from judging according to the appearances. You can conjure up in your mind 1,000 imaginary things that seem real to you. This shows that the mind creates by forming things according to its ideas. The world is awakening in a wonderful way to the truth about the creative power of the mind. Everywhere people are studying psychology or soul culture. The imagination builds things out of the one substance, if you will associate faith with it in its creative work. The things you make will be just as real as those that God makes. Whatever you make in mind and really put faith in will become substantial. Then you must be constantly on your guard as to what you believe, in order that you may bring what is for your good into manifestation. In what you do, have faith. In outer things, let me go back on that. In what you do, you have faith, ? In other things, you are building shadows without substance, shadows that cease as soon as your supporting thought is withdrawn from them, forms that will pass away and leave you nothing. If you would demonstrate true prosperity, you must turn from things, as Jesus told his disciples. Have faith in God. Do not have faith in anything less than God, in anything other than the one mind, for when your faith is centered there, you are building for eternity. Mind and the ideas of mind will never pass away. There will never be an end to God. There will never be an end to truth, which is God. There will never be an end to substance, which God is. Build with the divine substance, cultivate faith in realities, and lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Can I just say before I go on, I've been holding myself back. This stuff is talking about making sure that you speak in a right way, that you stop yourself from speaking lack. And it says in here, when you speak prosperity, you'll receive prosperity. He is not suggesting that there's a magic trick here. It's saying that your words matter because your words indicate what you're thinking and feeling about. And that's where your real manifestation factory is at work in your mind. And so that's why we're talking about faith and talking about what you say together here, because you have to make sure that you've got to listen to what you're saying so you can catch yourself and get yourself pointed in the direction you want to be. Not that you hope to be, but that you claim to be. And that's why the faith of this is so important. This is not about a magic trick. I just felt like, and several times that kept coming up. This is important. It's not a magic trick.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all have anything to add before I start reading again?
Go for it.
All right, page 50. The foundation of every work is an idea. Faith is the quality of mind which makes the idea stand out as real, not only to ourselves, but to others. When others have faith in the thing you are doing, making, or selling, they sell it as a real and worthwhile. Then your success and your prosperity are assured. Only that exists in whose becoming really visible or valuable you have great faith. If you say and believe, I have faith in the substance of God working in and through me to increase and bring abundance into my world, your faith will start to work mightily in the mind substance and make you prosperous. Whatever you put into substance along with faith will work out in manifestation in your world. We have seen it done, and we have proved the law too many times to have any doubt. The scriptures are filled with illustrations of this activity of bringing things to pass through faith in substance. The characters of whom we read in the scriptures represent ideas carrying forward their work in human souls. If we think that they existed only as people of thousands of years ago, we put our faith back thousands of years instead of letting it work for us in working for us this minute in our everyday affairs of life. To demonstrate as Jesus did, we must put our faith in the one substance and say, I have faith in God. You demonstrate prosperity by understanding of the prosperity law and by having faith in it, not by appealing to the sympathy of others, trying to get them to do something for you or give you something. Faithfulness and earnestness in the application of the prosperity law will assure you of success. In quotes, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom can be no variation, neither shadow that is cast by turning. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. Let us all know that just now we are in the very presence of creative mind, the mind that made the universe and everything in it. This mind is here and at work right now as much as it ever was or ever will be. When we fully realize this increase, the active mind in us immeasurably, you must realize that God is spirit and that spirit is very real and powerful and by far the most substantial thing in all the world. It may be hard for those who have become attached to material things to realize that there is an invisible real life and substance that is much more substantial and real than the material. The men of science tell us that the invisible forces have a power that is millions of times more real and substantial than all the material world. When we read statements about some of the recent discoveries of science, which everyone accepts and talks about, we are truly amazed. Such statements made by religionists would be called preposterous and unbelievable. Yet religion has been making the same statements in different ways for thousands of years. Now science is helping religion by proving them. When you guys all started these lessons, how was kind of that marriage of science and religion put together in a way that like made you either question what they were saying or made you feel like you had this new understanding you had been looking for?
You know, for me, it made sense, only because I had the privilege of taking philosophy classes when I was an undergraduate and graduate student. And at that time, there was an explosion around the area of quantum mechanics. And so, to make a long story short, you know, I did studies sort of in that area about the quantum world. And so, when I started Unity, it all made sense to me. You know, so the kind of classic thing in kind of quantum science, they talk about, you know, the butterfly can fly and flap its wings, and then it ends up creating all of these different, through different twists and turns energetically, can create a tsunami or whatever. There's kind of like, that's a classic example. It's
Right.
more complicated than that, but that's sort of the thing. And so it's like, that's exactly principle, right? Like all these things are interrelated. All of these things make um ultimately are of consequence. So that's like our thoughts. We think this small thing that I say or this small thing that I do is of no consequence, but in energetically, it's a tsunami. It's of huge magnitude because you're boxing yourself in, you're chaining yourself in, and at the same time, you're also doing that for your family and your partner and your friends because you're ascribing to these ideas maybe of lack and limitation. I don't deserve it. I'll never have it. And it's kind of like you were saying earlier, Wally, like you have to want it for yourself because indirectly, if we're thinking about collective consciousness, then we're boxing in all the other people around us and even people we don't know by holding on to those ideas.
Right.
That's kind of where I was at when I first started.
Yeah, and then that's the stuff we've got to go back and clean up, you know, as we say. It's like we've got to go unlearn what we once called truth because now we realize, no, there is plenty. Let me stop saying there's not enough because that is a lie. Let me stop lying first, you know, and get that cleaned up. And now let me train myself to speak the truth out loud because I've gotten so damn used to trying to make myself unworthy because that's what I think I'm supposed to do so that I seem humble. And you know, and it's like, no, I'm not helping anybody right now. I'm certainly not helping me, but I'm not helping people in China either by lying about what I'm worth.
For me, when I finally came into this new thought teaching, uh, I had in high school, I had read Jonathan Livingston Seagull and then Illusions, Confessions of a Reluctant Messiah. And those two books sort of introduced a metaphysical kind of nature and the importance of our consciousness, and they seemed more real than the science classes I had in school. And then I was out of it for a long time. And then I wandered into a Unity church to hear a friend sing. And these teachings felt real, but I wasn't really sure. And then I had one of those conversations. Okay, prove me, right? Let's do a trial. Let's see how this works. And I left a salaried based job where I was very unhappy and took a job in a retail store selling bunk beds. Went into to work in a children's furniture store and quickly noticed that and if you've ever worked in retail sales, it worked on an up system. So as a customer came into the store, somebody would greet them and that was their customer, and then the next person on the list was up. And so, if I went into this downward spiral of, oh, I haven't had any good ups today, my whole day would just go down the drain and it would be really bad. And then I learned that if I started blessing every customer that walked in that store and blessing every sale that happened, no matter who was doing the sale, my commissions grew.
Mhm.
Mm.
And so, I had to do this empirical trial. in my own life to see how this worked. And and it was scary leaving a salaried position and going straight into a commission sales position.
Yeah.
And within the first 3 months, I'd given myself an annual raise of like 10 grand.
Wow.
So, I proved it to myself.
No.
And part of that prosperity lesson was not being a victim, right? I have to take ownership for my experience.
I love what you say, Todd. I mean, part of these teachings engage us to be curious and to become students and practitioners. It's like what you said. Okay, prove me now. Like, give it a whirl, give it a try. Like, what have you got to lose? Maybe somebody's not going to go big and go bold like you did and step out and leave, your great job, but you can
It
start.
wasn't a great job.
Well, okay, well, whatever, right? But you left your job. So for some people, that's a big move, no matter how crappy it is, right? We're creatures of comfort sometimes. We've been taught that. So you stick to what you know because you don't know what the unknown will be like. Could be worse, right?
Yeah.
So, but part of the teachings that I love, it's like allowing us to like give ourselves permission to play with them and to test them out and to see how they feel, to try them on big and small ways, and to then be conscious about doing that so that like a scientist you're taking the notes. Okay, I did this, what happened later? I did this, oh wait a minute, this just happened, but I did this 2 weeks ago with that intention, and now I'm seeing the seeds flourish. So y'all give it a whirl out there.
Right.
Y'all give it a whirl. And I want to underline you just used the word, Christine, and I was going to underline it and it went right out of my head. You take a chance, right, to do this. And if you've been in this unity new thought arena for any amount of time, our fifth principle. And it's not only are you willing to take a chance, but you have a responsibility to. Because what good is knowing the truth if you don't put the truth into action?
It's just like a bunch of books on the shelves back there that have to get dusted, because they're just sitting there doing nothing until you open them up and then use the information in it.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
And so
Hey, Todd, do you feel like reading a bit? We got 3.5 pages left.
Yes, absolutely. But I got so carried away. Remind me where we are.
We're on the top of page 52.
Got it. 52. And I've got my reading glasses. So give me get these on. In comparing substance and matter as regards their relative reality, one scientific writer says that matter is merely a crack in the universal substance. It is universal substance that man is handling all the time with his spiritual mind. Through your thoughts, you deal with a wonderful spiritual substance, and it takes form in your consciousness according to your thought about it. That is why we must hold the thought of divine wisdom and understanding, so that we may use these creative mind powers righteously. We use them all the time, either consciously or consciously, and we should use them to our advantage and blessing. Every time you say, I am a little short of funds, I haven't as much money as I need, you are putting a limit on the substance in your own consciousness. Is that wisdom? You want a larger supply, not a limited supply of substance. Therefore, it is important to watch your thoughts so that the larger supply may come through your mind and into your affairs. Say to yourself, I am God's offspring, and I must think as God thinks. Therefore, I cannot think of any lack or limitation. It is impossible that in this universal mind that fills everything, there can be any such thing as absence. There is no lack of anything anywhere in reality. The only lack is the fear of lack in the mind of man. We do not need to overcome any lack, but we must overcome the fear of lack. This fear of lack lead men to speculate in order to accumulate substance and to have a lot of it stored up. This caused a still greater fear of lack in other men, and the situation grew worse and worse until it became generally believed that we must pile up the material symbols of substance for a possible lack in the future. We have tried that system and found that it fails us every time. We must learn to understand the divine law of supply and the original plan, which is that we have each day our daily bread. That is all we really want, just the amount of things we need for today's use, plus the absolute assurance that the supply for tomorrow's needs will be there when tomorrow comes. This assurance cannot be found in hoarding or piling up, as we have learned by experience. It can be had if we have faith and understand the truth about omnipresent, always available substance. Anything less than today's needs is not enough. Anything more than we need for today is a burden. Let us start with the fundamental proposition that there is plenty for you and for me, and that the substance is here all the time, supplying us with every needful thing according to our thought and word. In the morning, immediately upon awakening, take the quiet, meditative thought. A good foundation statement to hold in the silence is, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Jehovah, my rock and my redeemer. Think of the meaning of these words as you meditate on them. I'm going to read them one more time. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Jehovah, my rock and my redeemer. Think of the meaning of these words as you meditate on them. The words of your mouth and the thoughts of your heart are now and always molding the spiritual substance and bringing it into manifestation. They will not be acceptable to the Lord unless they bring into manifestation things that are true, lovely, and altogether good. After your morning meditation, when you have declared the omnipresence and the allness of the good, receive it as true and go forth to the day's activities with faith that all things needful are provided and your good must come. The soil and substance omnipresence has many names. Jesus called it the kingdom of the heavens. Moses in Genesis named it the Garden of Eden. Science says it is the ether. We live in it as fishes live in the sea, and it lives in us and supplies us with all things according to our thoughts. When you start to your work, pause a moment and declare, I set God before me this day to guide and guard, to protect and prosper me. Or the Spirit of the Lord goes before me this day and makes my way successful and prosperous. Make this your proclamation for the day. Decree it to be so, and the Lord will bring it to pass. During the day, if a thought of lack or limitation should for a moment disturb you, banish it at once with the statement, Jehovah is my shepherd, I shall not want. I'm going to stop for just a second there because I want to talk about the 23rd Psalm for a moment. When I was growing up, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I thought that meant I should not desire things. There should not be anything that I should want for and desire, because it's more godlike to not want things, right? But what I have come to understand is that thou shalt not want is a denial. The Lord is my shepherd, and every one of my needs is going to be met.
Right.
Now I'm going to step off of my soapbox and finish reading this paragraph.
I want to go back to another place in there too, but I got that same lesson, Todd, in the Lord's Prayer when I realized where it says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. That when I got the realization that it wasn't just saying, forgive me, oh yeah, and I should forgive them also. It was me saying to me, forgive me in the same damn way I'm forgiving somebody else. So if I'm not If it's well, I'll forgive you, but I won't forget it, then that's the same kind of forgiveness I should expect for myself, because that's what I'm giving out, you know. And yeah, so it's that same thing of like really getting a new understanding of those words. It's like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I have no need to want, because the Lord is my shepherd, as opposed to it's a bad thing to want, you know.
Yes. You want to add anything, Christine, or do you want me to read this last paragraph?
You can read the last paragraph, because then maybe, we can kind of, there's a lot of different things kind of running through from my mind for
Yeah.
these last things. So I'll wait.
Okay.
Hey, I did want to, if I go back on to the bottom of page 53, where there's the quoted reading that that says, let the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable to thy sight. I just, you know, old language of the Bible makes it thinking, all right, the old white guy sitting on the cloud up there, he's got to approve it or I'm going to get punished. And that's, of course, and if you believe that, this is written in a way that will support that. But if you don't, if you know that that's not the truth, what this is really saying is, make sure that what I'm speaking about and what I'm thinking about is lined up to the truth of who I am, because I am one with God. So if I'm saying some stuff, let me stop and say, is that something, if God was a person but still is everything I know God to be, would God say that? Would God do that? No. And I'm one with that. So I'm speaking outside of my nature. So I just want to make it clear, it's not seeking outside approval from some great force. It's saying, let me make sure my words and my thoughts are lined up with my highest and best.
Good call out. Okay, we're back to the bottom of 54. When your mind comes around again to the subject of prosperity, realize most strongly that your prosperity comes from God. It came with you from God, from your contact with God mind in your silence, and your prosperity is right with you wherever you are. Supply may seem to come through outer channels, but your real success depends on your inner hold on the prosperity realization. Be thankful for supply that comes through outer channels, but do not limit God's giving to any one channel. Look into him and be prospered. And for anybody that's confused about what that means your job is not your source. Your spouse is not your source. Your 401k is not your source. Social Security is not your source.
Your
No
sugar
check
daddy
that you
ain't your
receive.
source.
Your sugar daddy's not your source. So
Fun, but not your source. No.
God is your source and your supply. And there have been many times I have forgotten that in my life. So good reminder for me to read that out loud. Here are our prosperity prayers that Charles is leaving us with for tonight. I am always provided for because I have faith in thee as my omnipresent abundance. I have faith in thee as my almighty resource, and I trust thee to preserve me in my prosperity. I trust the universal spirit of prosperity in all my affairs. I come to God because I believe that he is a rewarder of them that seek after him. I trust, and so it is.
And so it is.
I just wanted to go back to something that I think is important, and I think we'll be delving some more into this as we go into later chapters. But he's starting to talk about this idea of the way we create potentially in the collective consciousness things that then outpicture in the material realm that are at best toxic and at worst, highly destructive. And that is that he's talking about when we start to hoard things. And we've talked about it a little bit, right, through this conversation. But, he talks on 52 and 53 about piling up things. And that becomes the source of like materialism and overconsumption. And that ultimately becomes the source of things that we have seen in our history, like colonization, or all these other things that have happened historically and socially, economically, because there's something within us that says that there's not enough. I am not enough. So I have to continue to sort of get and to get and to take and to take and to take from others and to deem others maybe not as worthy because I'm not worthy. And so I just offer this up for us to really think about the ways, because sometimes we think these are big ideas, like, well, I don't subscribe to that, like I don't believe in that. But sometimes in these small ways, sort of what I was saying earlier, it's these small little things that we believe sometimes in our life that then creates and goes into this collective consciousness that ultimately, whether we want to realize it or not, supports these larger ideas of lack in the world that do have destructive consequence. Am I making sense here? Because I'm really trying to grapple with this one here.
I am reminded of a quote, and I cannot remember who said it, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but uh, the inaction, our inaction is really an action, right? And so when we see things playing out on the world stage through mass consciousness, right, and we don't challenge it, then we're saying it's okay.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm hearing. And we have to be so very diligent about paying attention to what we are allowing.
Mhm.
Right. I know I've said it in some of the classes I lead, and I may have said it here. So pardon me if I'm repeating myself. But if we drive through a neighborhood in our cities or out in the country where it's a food desert and there's not an easy place to buy food, then and we don't reach out and say, hey, this is inappropriate that this area is a food desert, then we're holding in consciousness that it's okay that there is food insufficiency in a community in
Mhm.
which we live.
Mhm.
If we hold that and everybody holds that, then suddenly there's food insufficiency for the whole world.
Mhm.
And that's what we're looking at as a potentiality.
Mhm.
And so we have to shift our consciousness, you know, because if we allow that to be true, we're going to see really horrible things happen. More uh, colonization type activities. Seizing people's land.
I think of, something small, and this is where, so I love what you said, in terms of all of that about really holding ourselves accountable when we go into impoverished areas or things like that. Like, how do we see? Like, what eyes do we see? Are we seeing with the eyes of God? And so that's a whole, we could get into that, right? But the other thing I think about, like holding ourselves accountable for the little acts that we do sometimes that may contribute to the collective consciousness around prosperity. And I'm going to give you kind of a funny example that just came to me. Remember when we were going through, the major time, the pandemic, and there was a toilet paper shortage, and everybody was losing their ever loving mind to get toilet paper, and they were hoarding like stacks of toilet paper and like fighting at the Walmart for toilet paper. And so something like that is like, it's so silly, it's ridiculous, whatever you think about it, right? But on a larger level, that is so important. Like, am I a Trinity Truth student? Am I a New Thought student? And am I a student that is trying to ascribe and understand these teachings and doing these little small things that are then undermining all the things that I say I'm trying to build? And so I just offer that because that's my challenge too, is like constantly trying to hold myself accountable for all these little small things that I may do that seem irrelevant, but they never are, you
Right.
know.
And I think when we see all that stuff, because that same time era or a little bit be past the toilet paper, we then had people panicking over gas. I don't know if they had that where you were, but like they were catching people putting, like, when you lose sense of logic and you're putting gasoline in a trash bag, it's time to stop and take a breath, because now not only are you not doing anything helpful, you're potentially doing something harmful to yourself. And so I use that in the same example of when we're sitting around brooding on this negative thing is happening to me and everything is bad around me because fill in the blank, and we stay locked into that place. We start by not really needing to, but hoarding toilet paper. And if we hold on to that, everything's going bad, pretty soon we're putting gasoline in trash bags and we're going to burn the house down because we did something illogical. And then the same thing, I feel like, when we see things out in the world, like food deserts and stuff like that, I think we're immediately called to do two things. One, as truth students, to immediately not accept the truth of what we're seeing, saying there is no lack of food. There is more food on this planet than the world needs together. And I'm seeing it flow in a way that takes care, starting those prayers, and then doing what you can do. If you saw it, you're now one of the people. If you're like, oh, well, they need to do something about that. We're all part of the they. And if you saw it, you're now part of the they. It's like, and maybe you don't, you feel like, well, I don't know what I can do. Well, then do something simple. Call the mayor's office of that area and say, how can that area be helped getting something they need? Or write a letter to your congressman saying, you need to get some food to this place. We can do both. We can speak the truth, be affirmative, stay in recognizing that there is always plenty, and also say, hey, as human beings, we need to do a better job of helping each other in this area. And then wrapping up using what we're talking about in this chapter, like really using our faith in holding into there is always plenty, and we're going to work this out. Like, this is just another challenge to work out. It's no big deal in the mind of God. There is no miracles. It's just working out something that other people want to say is impossible. But I'm not going to link into that impossible, because then I won't be able to help either, because you can't help from the thought of impossible, right? So I know there's plenty. I have faith in that. I believe in God because I've seen all the abundance in the world. And so now I'm going to go about helping in whatever way I'm able to. And if it's just like the flap of that butterfly wing, what seems like, well, I'm not doing enough to really even matter, whatever you're doing that is being helpful intentionally is a step in the right direction.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, sometimes we think ourselves so small, right? I love
Yeah,
that you said that, Wally, because we forget, we want to think again, we have to do these grand, like big gestures. It has to be like amazing, wondrous, and sometimes they are like in that typical way that we experience them, but everything we do with intention and attention becomes wondrous and glorious and part of shifting consciousness. I
right.
love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I'm so honored to get to go through this information and talk to you too. It genuinely excites me to sit down and do this with you guys.
Yay, thank
Same
you.
here. Love
Thank
you
And
both
I
very
pray
much.
that everybody that's listening to us now is participating as well. And that while we've been talking, we've also been busy typing to you all, answering questions. And we're not looking for you to just agree with us. Like, if there's something that you're like, no, I don't recognize the truth in that. I was thinking of some cuss words, but I went with I don't recognize the truth in that. That's some BS belief system. It's like, say that too. Let's have that conversation, because there's growth in that conversation to be had.
And tell us your stories. I'm going to just say, because I love stories. So if you got a prosperity story you want to share, put it in the chat. I mean, I don't know if you're going to write volumes, but, definitely let us know, how have these principles worked in your life so far? Like, testify on, on this chat and this feed, because that's important too. That's really, for me in Unity, what got me jazzed is like hearing and seeing how these principles as applied were working in people's life. And I was like, I want some of that. So your stories matter. Your stories are important. So please share them.
Awesome.
Amen. That sums it up.
All right. That wraps up another lesson. We love and bless you all, and have a great night, day, whatever time of the day you're watching this.
And we will see you soon.
Next week.
Next week.
Bye.